During World War II, there were multiple areas in America that suddenly had new life to them. One of these areas was Halls, Tennessee, where they actually placed one of the largest training operations for B-17 crews in the United States during the Second World War. It had 3 runways and was home to thousands of individuals who maintained the aircraft, who worked on the aircraft, who taught, and who flew them, who would eventually go to Europe and fight against Nazi Germany. Nowadays, it is one active runway for a paltry amount of maybe 6 airplanes, including some crop dusters. The other 2 runways have been relegated to freight use, parking trailers or just basic movements, and are cracked and pretty much destroyed. While the museum here does have an initiative to fix up these runways and bring them back to their former glory, it's sort of, nothing's really happened. And as such, they aren't able to bring in big aircraft here and have events. Now, right behind me is the runway, or rather what's left of 2 of them, and the main one that I actually landed on today. What is so significant about this, and why am I here? Specifically, this ended up being in my backyard. It's about an 1.5-hour flight, 3 hours of a drive to get here. And I grew up around a couple Air Force bases, but none of them were specifically for B-17s. They were just general Air Force bases for training, for staging military aircraft. Whereas this one was specifically for training B-17 crews. Now, during the operation here, there were multiple wrecks and a lot of crews lost their lives before ever making it to Europe. However, this field served as a critical juncture for troops learning the ins and outs of bombing cities and flying these aircraft. In fact, this facility here was the largest training ground for B-17 crews this side of the Mississippi inland. In fact, it was the only one inland, and it was one of the largest on this side of the Mississippi. Obviously, the West Coast had a few more extra, mainly because that's where most B-17s were produced, and so logistically, it just made sense. However, out here on the East Coast, in the middle of who knows where, it sparked new life in the community. Nowadays, most of the cruise quarters and the areas where they slept, the barracks, the mess hall, have been relegated to lone chimneys, if anything at all. And really, the only building that's left standing is the lockers for the Norden bomb site, with the doors ripped off the hinges, and they're just an empty concrete block. There is a hangar that used to store B-17s, but it's now become a storage unit for someone who sells antiques, which, in my opinion, sort of serves it well. The other thing here, which is a new construction, is a museum, and we'll be going over that shortly. However, I did want to discuss some of the important things that these fields played. Now, obviously, the runway that is active is much narrower and is in bad condition, and it's just one out of the other 3. But what was once a bustling community for aviation and for these bombers going off and committing to fighting the Nazis or fighting the Imperial Japanese has now become farmland with just some concrete pieces in the middle. Out here in this field, there were multiple times where B-17s weren't able to land properly and they crashed or they had a taxi accident. It's nice to see that we do have a museum here to honor the men who served here, who trained here, and who would eventually go out and fly over Europe, bombing the Germans and crippling their industry, or flying in the Pacific, supporting the United States' island hopping strategy and crippling the Japanese industry. After the war had ended, there was a lot of discussion about keeping this as an active airport. In fact, most Air Force bases either remained so after the war or were converted to normal civilian use. But there's a lot of civilian airports that started out as Air Force bases constructed during World War II. And there was a large fight to keep this airport maintained, well-funded, and keep the majority of the runways, if not all 3. Unfortunately, they lost that battle, and we only have the one active now. And the other 2, like I said before, are slowly being retaken by nature. Obviously, there's still an ongoing fight to restore at least one runway into full operational condition, and not just have the 75-foot width that it has, along with the 4,700-foot length, but to increase it to the natural borders of the runway that was used by the B-17 crews. This would allow for a few things and could actually bring in more traffic for this museum here. However, it is an ongoing battle, and the museum here is front and center trying to get it, trying to help the aviators and the pilots here get this done. It would also help the museum, as they'd love to bring in old aircraft, old military aircraft, and have events. In this area here, it'd be perfect to have, something along the lines of a B-17, like the EAA's aluminum overcast, which is the shirt that I'm wearing. It would also be available for B-29s, which there were several here that flew in, especially when Jimmy Doolittle came and visited this area. This area has a lot of history, and Halls specifically, for a very long time, was very attached to what this base represented, and fought for a very long time in order to keep this base somewhat funded and operational after the war ended. And if you want to go ahead and take a look at the airfield, one of the runways is actually accessible by car, and I had the opportunity to drive on it the last time that I came out here. It was very interesting. Now I'm here and I was actually able to land on one of the runways, which is really cool. Hello, Wolf of 1918 from the future here. Since the video is still playing and I'm stepping in, you might be able to guess what happened. This camera that I was using for this video was brand new to me, and I somehow ended up not recording any sound during my time in the museum, which is absolutely amazing. I had a wonderful interview with the guy who operates it. He talked so much about the base, and there's so much information that I no longer have because no sound was on there. I guess the benefit is that now the video isn't going to be super long, and now I'm just going to give you guys a Cliff Notes version that I didn't go over while I was on the ramp. But it still kind of sucks that I wasn't able to capture that. So my apologies for not being able to have a full video. This is the first time this has happened to me where I have been unable to re-record because of the distance. So the things that I ended up not covering specifically were things that I knew that would be covered by the interview. And unfortunately, that is all gone. So I will try to give a basic rundown on that. The museum was founded quite a while ago. It's basically been there since around 1997. That was when it was built. But the organization, the Veterans Museum Organization, has been around for quite a lot longer, helping organize the various air shows that were held there. The museum was eventually built by one of the people who actually grew up in the area while the Airbase was still active. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago. Since then, they've grown quite a bit. Their museum has over doubled in size, with new grants from the local government being able to give them more money in order to expand what they're looking to do. There is a plan to eventually, as I mentioned in the video where I was recording, to repave the runway and get it usable and bring back the air shows, but unfortunately, because of people getting older and aircraft becoming more expensive to maintain, an air show in the middle of nowhere just doesn't seem viable. During its time as an actual active air base, there were some 7,700 men who were trained and sent to Europe to fight the Nazis. Now, that doesn't include everyone on base for maintaining the aircraft, for training the crews, and for people who just didn't make it all the way through or were transferred somewhere else. It housed a lot of people. About 20 aircraft crashed during the war in its 3 years of operation, and several hundred men lost their lives from these accidents. There are multiple vehicles on display here that have been donated through the years, and most, if not all, of the displays showing life on the base or how the vehicles looked in the field, or just the various displays in general showing life as a soldier, were actually developed by World War II veterans. So you're not seeing someone trying to recreate something that they're looking at through pictures. You're seeing things that were recreated by the veterans who experienced it themselves. These displays have not been touched since the veterans first initially set them up about 10 or so years ago, if not longer, and many of the veterans who helped set it up are long gone. So this is not just a recreation of what people think it might have been. This is specifically what the veterans experienced. Now, the museum is specifically built around the experience of Halls, the town of Halls in Tennessee. Most of the photos and the people that you're going to see plastered on the different walls and displays are going to be people from the area who either worked on the base or eventually went off to fight in the war. There are several cool things, including a rather large helicopter and a jet fighter. There is jeeps, medical vehicles, some German items that are on display, and quite a lot of radio equipment that you can't really find very many other places. Unfortunately, I didn't get a video of the Norden bomb site lockers, but there are plenty of photos of that, and I'm probably going to post one up here. As well as I didn't get any footage of the hangar. But I do want to end it with one last message. And that's basically that if you live in the area, if you are nearby, or if you're traveling through, I highly recommend making a slight diversion to go to Hall's Field. It's a very cool place. It doesn't get a lot of foot traffic. I flew over on a Sunday afternoon, and there was nobody there. In fact, I believe I was the first person there that day, and there was only 2 people the day before on a Saturday. And this was a weekend with beautiful flying weather, so people could easily fly in, and nothing really going on to stop people from going because of, an event. It's a very cool area, although the airport is a bit run down and 2 of the runways are just absolute garbage. The museum itself has a lot of cool items, as you've probably seen in the video that is showing the exhibits right now. And I highly recommend it. The people there are very invested in what they're doing, and it is a very, very cool place that needs a lot more attention than what it's getting. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please enjoy the next several minutes of my flight back to my home base airport.
Clear prep.
Shut down. Avionics off. Mixer cut off. Master off. Mags off.